if somebody says, well, I want to do an elk hunt. Well, we say, okay, well, have you hunted elk before? Did you have a particular destination in mind? Do you have any preference points if you do have any, maybe a Western state in mind? Are you thinking a rifle hunt, an archery hunt, a muzzleloader hunt? Are you thinking early season, mid-season, late season, private land ranch hunt, public land wilderness hunt? If you want to risk $2,500 on a Wyoming antelope hunt, or maybe $3,500 on a Missouri whitetail hunt, that's one thing. But when you're talking $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 or more for an Alaska bear hunt or Yukon moose hunt or an African safari, to me now that's a huge amount of money to be essentially rolling the dice in booking a trip with an outfitter that you either don't know yourself or don't know someone whose opinion you value and trust.
Welcome to the RnA Outdoors podcast, hosted by Lucas Paw. Our purpose is to help educate and inspire within you a renowned passion for the outdoors. So join us as we speak with experts in the industry to share insight and knowledge that helps make hunters and anglers more successful. All right, welcome listeners, and happy 2021. Hey, it's Lucas Paw, and you are listening to the RnA Outdoors podcast, where our concept is keep the outdoors simple. So excited to bring you all a new episode today, and thought we would do just a little bit of a theme song here related to the times, a little Led Zeppelin, When the Levee Breaks. So speaking of levees, we've got no shortage of rainfall here in California, which has really been a blessing. Some are equating it to the Pineapple Express storm moving through the Central Coast right now, and we're literally getting inches of rain. And that's right, inches of rain, which is a big deal for us here, but also snow in the Sierras as well. So, which is very important. So, again, a much-needed rain, and just blessed that we're getting that right now. So, what I do want to do is talk a little bit about the show that we have today. I'm really excited and encouraged to meet with some friends of mine over at Hunt Nation. I've got Don Sangster, who is going to introduce himself here, but his actual title is an adventure consultant. A little bit about Hunt Nation. They've been in operation over 20 years. Some of you may see emails that come out from them, which typically come out weekly. They represent over 300 different outfitters worldwide, which is pretty interesting. And they basically are a booking agency that books hunts both for fishing and hunting adventures all over the world. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Don Sangster to the RnA Outdoors podcast. Welcome, Don.
Thanks, Lucas. Glad to be on. Thanks for having me.
Yeah. So maybe what we could do, Don, maybe just talk a little bit about yourself, and then maybe talk a little bit about Hunt Nation and kind of what your guys' purpose and what you guys do.
Sure, thanks. So I've worn a number of different hats in the outdoors industry for over 2 decades now. I've been an outdoor writer for over 20 years. I've written for pretty much every major publication in Canada where I live, as well as a few down in the States. Sports Afield, Bass Pro Shops website. I did a weekly column for the Bass Pro Shops website for a couple of years. I've also been involved in sales repping, distributing, etc., different outdoors product lines. So I've worn a number of hats in the outdoors industry, but without sort of realizing it, I guess all of it was kind of leading up to what I do now at Hunt Nation, because I just, frankly, I found that anything that took me too far from, actual hunting wasn't really where my passion lay. And so when I was asked to join Hunt Nation a number of years ago, it was a really good fit. And I enjoy very much what I do, because I guess the biggest thing we do is we help people, we help folks. And that's always a good thing. Basically what we do, as you said, we've been in business over 20 years. We started in Wyoming, and that's where our roots are, in Cheyenne, Wyoming. We still have an office there. But since then, we've expanded. We now have offices in Florida, Missouri, and then a few years ago, we opened an office up here in Canada where I am. And these offices are staffed by full-time agents. This is what we do for a living. This isn't a hobby or a sideline. This is what we do. And as you also said, we work with about 300 plus outfitters around the world. And it's not just hunting, despite our name. We do fishing as well. And essentially, you initially referred to me as an adventure consultant, and that's actually kind of the term we prefer. Sort of the industry more commonly says booking agent, but to me, that denotes more of somebody who just answers the phone and takes a booking from a client. And we do far more than that. To give you an example, if somebody says, well, I want to do an elk hunt. Well, we say, okay, well, have you hunted elk before? Did you have a particular destination in mind? Do you have any preference points? If you do have any, maybe a Western state in mind. Are you thinking a rifle hunt, an archery hunt, a muzzleloader hunt? Are you thinking early season, mid-season, late season, private land ranch hunt, public land wilderness hunt? Do you have any physical limitations that might come into play? Can you ride a horse? What are your realistic trophy expectations for such a hunt? And then a lot of cases, a real big factor is, what's your budget? So we really do work with the client to try to understand exactly what it is they're looking for. And then we try and match that up with something that we offer through the various outfitters that we work with. So we really do try and sort of match make in that regard to find the right fit. And, we completely understand that not every trip is right for everybody. But, we've built a pretty good reputation over 20 plus years in the industry of telling it like it is. And we do tell it like it is, because the reality is, when you work with as many different good outfitters as we do, offering literally thousands of different trips between them, although not every trip is right for everybody, we're pretty sure we've got something to offer just about everybody. So there's no need to embellish or fluff up a trip or sugarcoat the realities of, this is a tough physical hunt. If you're not 9 or 10 out of 10 on the fitness scale, this is not the hunt for you. We'll tell it like it is and let people decide for themselves whether that's what they're looking for or not. And that's essentially what we do in a nutshell is we help people find the right trip. And, some people say, well, I can do that myself. Why do I need you to do that for me? And I think it boils down to three things. I think we can save you time. I think we can save you some worry. And in some cases, we can save you some money even. When it comes to saving time, that's the one thing that you can't buy and that is always in short supply. And, I mentioned that elk hunting example, but take another approach. Maybe you decide you want to do a safari in South Africa, and you start Googling South African safaris. Try doing that sometime and see the overwhelming flood of hits that you'll receive when you Google something like that. And it's intimidating. Where would you start to try and start figuring out where, the research? And that's really what it boils down to, is hours, days, weeks, maybe months of research required to try and figure out, what's out there, what am I looking for, what's available. And most of us don't have that kind of time, or maybe we have the time, but we just don't have the inclination. We'd rather spend that time with family or out in the field, or maybe we're busy at work, whatever the case may be. So we really save you time. The second thing we save you is worry. And what do I mean by worry? Well, I don't think the outdoors industry, the outfitting industry, is really any different from any other industry in the sense that the overwhelming majority of outfitters are very good. They're very good at what they do. But there are always a few bad apples that need to be avoided. And even if it's not sort of disingenuous outfitters, it's just a matter of making sure you're getting what you expected, what you wanted, what you were looking for, what was advertised. And that's not always the case if clients and outfitters aren't necessarily on the same page when it comes to asking the right questions. And I was a fan of booking agents long before I became one. In fact, I was a client of this firm before I came to work at Hunt Nation. And I've long felt that, if you want to risk $2,500 on a Wyoming antelope hunt, or maybe $3,500 on a Missouri whitetail hunt, that's one thing. But when you're talking $20,000, $25,000, $30,000 or more for an Alaska bear hunt or Yukon moose hunt or an African safari, to me now that's a huge amount of money to be essentially rolling the dice in booking a trip with an outfitter that you either don't know yourself or don't know someone whose opinion you value and trust, who knows the outfitter, has hunted with the outfitter, etc. I think you're taking an unnecessary risk, in my opinion. And that's why I always felt that for a trip of that magnitude, I wasn't going to do it on my own. And in fact, I didn't. The first two big trips I did abroad, I booked through a booking agent because I wanted to make sure that I wasn't, that I was getting what I was looking to get, essentially. And, I've never looked back. I've always been a fan of that. And some people say, well, that's why I go to the trade shows. That's why I go to the sports shows, the SCI, Dallas Safari Club, shows like that. Well, COVID has prevented that from happening recently anyway. But aside from that, to that I say, well, yes, I hear you. But I think if somebody is trying to sort of pull the wool over your eyes in some regard, then talking to them at a show and looking them in the eye and asking them questions, well, let's put it this way. I guess I'm probably not a good enough judge of character to be able to see through that. If somebody was trying to hoodwink me, I'd probably fall for it, because the reality is those folks know the questions you're going to ask before you even ask them, and they know what answers you want to hear. And to me, that's not sufficient for my peace of mind. So that's the save the worry, because we've basically done that legwork for you already. We vetted all these outfitters before we ever brought them on. We've worked with many of them for many, many years, sent many clients to them over the years. We've also personally hunted with many of them. Granted, with 300 plus around the world, it's hard to get to them all, but we've been to a lot of them. And we continue to do it every year. Each of us in the office, we go and visit a number of these outfitters, particularly new ones or ones that we haven't yet been to or haven't been to in some time. Those we try to prioritize to visit soon. Sometimes we will insist on visiting one first before we even bring them on board. We'll do an inspection trip with them before we're prepared to offer it to our clients. But it boils down to, there's just no substitute for been there, done that. That when you're talking to a client, to be able to tell them exactly what it's like, what they can expect. When they hear that you've been there yourself and you've done that trip, it's like, oh, really? Yeah, of course. I mean, we all want to feel that level of comfort, and so we really, really do try to visit as many of them as possible to give that sort of personal level of knowledge and attention. So that's the save the worry part of it. And the third is the save the money. And that's not always true. We can't always save you money, but we can sometimes. And that comes in the form of, well, first of all, I should make it clear that, it doesn't cost you any extra to use our services. So while we may not always be able to save you money, it also doesn't cost you any money because we don't charge. Some agents in the industry may charge a fee or may charge like an annual membership or something like that, or a one-time membership. We don't do that. It costs the client the same to book a trip through an outfitter directly as it costs to book through us. So there's really nothing to lose from that perspective. And where we can sometimes save you money is particularly when it comes to sort of either a cancellation discount or a last minute opportunity or something like that. Sometimes outfitters offer our clients special pricing or special perks, but more often it's suddenly they've got a cancellation. Somebody was supposed to do a moose hunt in September and they've just canceled, and now the outfitter comes to us and say, look, can you use your network to fill this spot for me as soon as possible? And there's a significant discount involved for the client. So, if a client had just been out looking for a moose hunt, they probably wouldn't have found that. They wouldn't have got that discount, whereas booking through us, we can sometimes save you a pile of money. So it comes down to those three saves, I think: to save the time, save the worry, and sometimes even save you money. That's in a nutshell what we do. We do it every day. We do it pretty well. We've been doing it a long time, and we really enjoy what we do.
Don, that's a great introduction, and appreciate kind of giving both context to the history, but also kind of giving the listeners an idea of what services you guys can provide. Just to kind of go back on the history. So you said that you guys are based out of Wyoming, but you're actually in Canada. So maybe you could explain a little bit kind of how organizationally you guys are structured and how that's set up.
Yeah, so our founder, his name is Butch Manassi. He started the company 20 plus years ago, and he was actually a lawyer by trade in Connecticut, I believe it was. And he got tired of doing that after a while, and he was a big outdoorsman, still is. He's hunted and fished around the world. And he decided he and his wife got out of the legal game and decided to move out west where the hunting and fishing is better, and quickly realized that he wanted something more than just doing these trips for himself. He wanted to be involved in the industry in some capacity, and one thing led to another, and he started this firm 20 plus years ago in Cheyenne. Over that time, we've experienced tremendous growth. So the firm has grown, and eventually we opened an office in Florida, as I mentioned, another one in Missouri, and we offer so many trips in Canada that they decided a few years back that having someone in Canada, an office in Canada, made some sense. So we opened that office, and that's where I'm located. So, but we don't differentiate at all when it comes to geography in terms of those offices. So all of those offices deal with clients from around the world and outfitters from around the world. So it really is inconsequential where that office or agent is located. We're all fully versed on all of the trips that we offer and deal with literally clients from four corners of the globe. So structurally, it's just sort of where we happen to be, but it doesn't really impact clients at all in that regard. So, yeah.
So kind of build on your comment about, a lot of times prospective clients like to go to the trade shows. You talked about that. So SCI, Dallas Safari, Sheep Show, all the different shows this year that have basically been canceled and gone virtual. So this really plays into your guys' playbook a little bit based on that, because people can't be there. But let's say I'm a prospective client, and maybe you can walk me through the process. I've been to Africa, but let's say I want to go to Africa, never been. And you're right, go Google African safaris. It's very overwhelming. How do you guys work through with a prospective client, and really, because you talked about you try to meet their needs and what they're looking for, but I'm sure you guys have multiple African outfitters that you provide. How does that process work when someone comes to you kind of looking for that type of hunt?
Yeah, so we build in a certain amount of redundancy in some of the places where we offer trips, and South Africa is one of those. So as much as we are always on the lookout for new outfits, new operations, things that are different, unique, whatever, the reality is we work with probably a dozen different outfitters in South Africa, and there's absolutely some overlap in terms of what they offer and where they offer it. So it's not that they're all completely distinct and unique, but we like to have a little bit of redundancy in some cases because sometimes availability isn't there. Sometimes a client says, look, it's got to be, April of 2022. That's the only time I can go. And maybe ABC outfitter has no availability at that time, but outfitter DEF does. So, that helps in that regard. But, what we'll do is we'll talk to the client and say, okay, so have you hunted before? No? All right. What's on your wish list? What are the species that you absolutely are looking to target? And what sort of, maybe secondary would be nice. Of course, South Africa is one of those countries where in Africa where the overwhelming majority of the hunting there is on high fence game ranches, estates, hunting estates. And not everybody necessarily realizes that. And some that do would prefer not to hunt someplace that is a fenced ranch, regardless of the size. Almost all are very, very large, and the fencing really doesn't impact the hunt. But there are some people who just prefer not to do that, and maybe they want to go strictly free range. Well, that narrows things down tremendously because there's very few. We do work with a terrific one, but the point is that'll narrow things down. If that doesn't narrow things down, certainly the timing of when somebody might want to go, how many people perhaps in their party, what species they are interested in, and then oftentimes budget. Oftentimes budget is the big one. Someone says, look, I'd really like to get this and this and this, but I've got a couple kids in college. I just can't afford a $10,000 trip. This has to be, $5,000 all in. And, what can you do? What's the best deal you can find me? I don't care where it is in South Africa, but these are the critters I want. And here's my budget. Make it happen. So that's when we start sort of reverse engineering things a little bit and starting with the outfitters in terms of what can you offer within a certain budget at a certain time frame for this party of two or this party of four. So there's different ways to approach it, different ways to skin the cat, so to speak. But the more we talk to the client, the more we get to understand their priorities, their needs, their desires, requirements, and that just does start to quickly narrow down the options. In the end, there may only be 2 or 3 outfitters that are going to possibly fit the bill in terms of what the client is looking for, and we'll reach out to all of them and say, okay, do you have availability during this time? Maybe the first one doesn't, but the second and third ones do. So now the client's got an option of a couple different outfitters to choose from. We have a detailed, we call it a write-up, but it's essentially a marketing document about all the various trips we offer, 10, 12 pages with descriptions and photos and all sorts of details about travel and, of course, pricing, seasons, trophy quality, accommodations, all this kind of good information. So the client will have the ability to compare sort of side by side the information on 2 or 3 different outfits and ultimately make the decision which is the one they like the best, looks the best, sounds the best, and they think they feel that, it offers them what they're looking for. So we can quickly, I mentioned before, it may take you hours, days, weeks, months to do all this research for yourself. You can literally call us up, and in a matter of minutes, we can cut through all that time it would take you to do it on your own. And if you want, in a matter of one phone call, we could have that trip booked for you rather than spending, some people enjoy the process. Don't get me wrong. Some people really, the planning and the research and all of that is part of the thrill for people to plan a trip of this magnitude. But others say, look, I've got the money, but I don't have the time. I need you to help me. This is what I want. Find me what you're looking for. And we absolutely have clients like that call us up every year or 2 or 3 times a year even and say, all right, what's the next trip we're going to take? Here's what I'm thinking. What have you got to offer? So our clients come in all sort of shapes and sizes in terms of what they're looking for and their backgrounds and their budgets. And we can work with just about all of them.
Yeah, and I think that's important that you guys can kind of meet people, at some point, and everyone's journey is different, right? You got people, like you said, that are just starting out, maybe more on a budget and maybe from a time constraint standpoint. And then you've probably got people that could have, a $500,000 budget a year that they're spending on hunts. And you guys, have really become, probably, lifetime clients with them because you're really setting up schedules for them in certain years. So I can definitely see, the benefit and the value in using a system like this. Now, to kind of transition back a little bit, so we've talked heavily about like South Africa, right? And which you said you guys have multiple outfitters that you use in South Africa for multiple options for a lot of different reasons. But, right now, when you look at, international traveling, that's a struggle in some places, right? Trying to get to New Zealand where you got to do a mandatory government quarantine and pay to be quarantined. South Africa is now back on the list of non-travel. So I guess my question would be have you guys seen a little bit of that impact over the course of the last year? But has that spawned more of a domestic United States clientele book of folks where you're seeing more bookings maybe, domestically than you have internationally?
Absolutely, Lucas. It has been unprecedented, frankly, the demand for continental United States and even Alaska. We sent a lot of folks to Alaska this summer on fishing trips. But just about it's subsided a little bit now because people have already sort of made a lot of the plans. But going back to sort of the summer, basically, we would daily get multiple calls from people saying, look, I was supposed to do a sheep hunt in Canada or I was supposed to be going to Africa in the fall and it's off. So what have you got? What can you offer me in terms of a Midwest whitetail hunt or a Western elk hunt or mule deer hunt or something? And so as a result, the demand for those trips went through the roof for 2020. And it wasn't long before everything that was still available for 2020 was filled. And then there was overflow to 2021. And of course, there were already hunts on the books for 21 before, all of that sudden influx or sort of uptick in bookings for 21, but also trips from 20 that got rolled to 21. So suddenly 21 became very, very tight. And here we are sort of late January and elk hunts in particular, that's our bread and butter. We probably sell more elk hunts than anything else. We've got very, very little left for this fall anywhere because of the big surge in demand for trips that people knew they could take or were pretty sure they could take at least versus ones that were already booked and postponed or uncertain. And of course, it's Canada, it's Africa, it's South America, Argentina particularly. We've got the whole spring red stag season in 2020 in Argentina got wiped out. Not sure whether 21 is going to happen. So the impact of this is going to be felt well beyond 21 into 22, maybe even 23. And that's if we don't really see too much more disruption in 21. And we can't guarantee that, where spring is just around the corner and, the Canadian outfitters, when it comes to spring bear, they lost their whole 20 season as a result of COVID. And at the time, I don't think nobody would have envisioned that 21 could be in jeopardy. And yet here we are. It's really just around the corner. And at this point, it's very, very uncertain that there'll be a 21 spring season in Canada for bear. In fact, I think a lot of outfitters in Canada are now more crossing their fingers for summer season, whether it's fishing June, July, August, or the early hunts in August for sheep and caribou, etc. I think a lot of them have already shifted focus to that and kind of written off the spring bear season. So absolutely, that's driving demand and overflows, spillover of demand to just about anything we can offer in the lower 48.
Yeah. And to kind of also touch back, so, you talked about elk hunts. You guys do a ton of elk hunts, and, 'tis the season, right? It's January. I'm a points guy, so I've been applying 15, 20 years in a lot of states. So, right, Wyoming's hitting, Arizona hits next month. So I would assume that you talked about working with clients and points. Is that something else or a service that you guys provide and help people with, ensuring, okay, I'm going into Wyoming this year with 15 points, right? I'm different than the guy who's coming in that's got 5 points. Would you handle those clients differently based on that?
Yeah. So one of the things we do in terms of marketing is, I think you mentioned it earlier, is we put out a weekly email newsletter. It goes out every Tuesday morning by email. And in that, we always feature a nice selection of different trips, all varieties from around the world. But we're also very seasonally oriented when it comes to that. So the last several weeks, going back into November, even December, we've been pushing heavily the Wyoming trips, reminding people that the deadline for applying for elk in Wyoming is end of January. So we've been sort of pushing that pretty strongly for some time now. It appears sort of as a header in our newsletters leading up to those deadlines, reminding people. But then we also make sure that we're offering something. So I just recently personally posted a trip that is exactly for a guy with max elk points in Wyoming, because our clients run the spectrum from no points, didn't even know there was such a thing as preference points, all the way up to max preference points and everything in between. So we do, 1 week we may offer a trip that takes, it's a general tag in Wyoming that just takes 2 points to draw. And the next time we're featuring one that takes max points. So we do have something to offer all the way through that. We do remind people sort of generically about these upcoming deadlines. But then once somebody has booked a trip, then whether it's the outfitter themselves or through us, we make sure that they're aware of the deadline that they've got in terms of filing their application. We make sure they understand what tag it is that they're applying for, what unit, what type of tag, what unit. We make sure that they don't miss those kinds of deadlines. And then preference points, when July 1st comes around and the season for purchasing preference points in Wyoming, for instance, again, we put out something to clients reminding them. And we have a number of clients who routinely will purchase, for instance, Wyoming, elk, deer, antelope, a point for each every year, even when they don't have any particular specific plans to do a hunt for one of those species in the upcoming future. And I was actually sort of a classic example of that a couple of years ago. I had just started collecting points in Wyoming. I purchased my first preference point the year before. And around this time in January, this is going back a few years now, one of our terrific outfitters in northwest Wyoming, just outside of Yellowstone in the Thoroughfare Wilderness area, had a cancellation. And they even offered a discount on the hunt. But the catch was that it took a preference point to draw. Fortunately, I had a preference point in my pocket. I hadn't had any plans for it when I purchased it, but it was there. I was able to take advantage of that opportunity, took it, drew the tag, went on the hunt, and had one terrific time. So preference points are a big deal for the West. It's sort of the way of the world out there these days. So we do encourage people to make sure they're putting in for anything that may even down the road interest them. But yes, we definitely make sure people understand those upcoming deadlines. And then once they've booked, we ensure that either directly with the outfitter or through us, they don't miss any deadlines. Sure. And they apply for things on time.
Yeah.
And correctly.
Well, and when you think about preference points, I mean, like I said, there's a lot invested when you start talking about a license every year you buy, a preference point for sheep in Wyoming. If you don't apply in the draw, which you'd be crazy not to apply in the draw, but you should always apply for sheep. But if you only buy a preference point, $250, whatever that is, it's a lot of money people get tied up in points. And when you think about it, you're a guy that's got max in, Arizona for deer. You probably want to find, someone that you trust and you want to go with, right? Because you've been putting all that time and money in, and obviously you guys would offer services of different outfitters that are established, that are credible, to where you're not sending someone who's, again, spent 25 years spending $150 a year buying a license, $4,000 later, and they finally draw this tag. It's important that they have good resources and places to go to utilize those preference points when they use them. So,
occasionally we actually get people call us up who've drawn a coveted tag of whatever description in whatever jurisdiction. Perhaps they didn't actually think they were going to draw. Maybe it was a bit of a shock, and as a result, they hadn't really made any plans. They don't really have a plan for where they're going to go, who they're going to hunt with, if they're going to use a guide or an outfitter. And they're calling us up sort of after the fact, after they've drawn, and are potentially risking wasting this tag that's really, really hard to draw because they hadn't really figured out what they were going to do once they drew. And that's definitely not what we would advise. We always suggest the other way around, having the plan for what you want to do first, then start applying, so that once you draw, the rest is already in place. It's just a matter of finalizing the details, the dates, whatever, but as opposed to just scrambling at the last minute once the tag is in hand and as I said, risking wasting it because you don't really know what you're going to do with it now that. And this is something that sometimes the whole sort of points thing in Wyoming is a good example. Some people assume that a tag that is easy to draw, say antelope, for instance, well, this tag is very easy to draw. Well, that must mean that the hunting isn't very good there. Conversely, this other tag in another area is very difficult to draw. So it must be a crackerjack of a hunt, really, really good hunt. That's why it's so difficult to draw. And the reality is that's not necessarily the case. And antelope is maybe the best example of that. Sometimes the reason why a particular tag is easy to draw is because it's all private land. There's really no access, no public land available in a particular area. So unless you know somebody who owns land there or have access to it, or you go through an outfitter, you really don't have any hope of being able to hunt that area, even if you draw the tag. And as a result, not very many people apply. And as a result, it's easy to draw. Conversely, you could have another area that has quite a bit of public land. And because there's lots of public land, there is a lot of people applying. And because there's so many people applying, the tag can be more difficult to draw. But again, does that mean it's a better hunt? I don't know. Personally, I think I'd rather be hunting in an area that's all private land with hardly anybody hunting it versus an area that's got quite a bit of public land, but just tons of hunters out there. I think I know which one probably is going to be the better hunt, but it's not indicative of the number of points required to draw the tag. So points are, not always the bellwether in terms of what the area or the hunt is like. But again, that's what a good agent can help you with, help you navigate some of that and understand some of the intricacies of the point system, and whether it's a group or first choice, second choice, third choice, these kinds of things that can get a little bit complicated in some jurisdictions. We can help with that.
Yeah, and I want to speak back to you said, so if someone is interested in a hunt, and I'll use my example because, a lot of stuff that I've had planned has been postponed and canceled too. So I was looking at trying to look at maybe getting my brother and I like a good spring bear hunt somewhere. And, synonymous with everything going on in California right now around bears. We can't hunt bears in the spring here, but, right. And I've hunted bears and I've shot a bear, but he's never hunted a bear and he's never killed anything with his bow. I thought, what better hunt to do than maybe get him in a stand, or maybe we'll find a good spot and stock opportunity in Idaho. Well, I saw something cross my email from Hunt Nation regarding a good wilderness, hunt in Idaho. So I reached out, and I think that's when I got Ed, and Ed sent me some information, and again, sent me the outfitter's information. It had photos, it had successes, the success rate. It had basically all the information on wilderness hunt. Here's what you're going to do. Here's your itinerary. Very detailed, very well thought out, and also provided me with the information that I was looking for, right? That I knew, hey, you want to shoot 2 bears, pretty high probability you will. And oh, by the way, there's potential to shoot a wolf too. And so it was cool getting that packet of information. And just from my perspective as being, someone looking for, a hunt, because if it were me, I would just basically go buy a tag and I would show up in Idaho and I'd go hunt. But this is a different scenario for my brother. And so anyway, it was neat having that. And so I don't know if there's anything you can elaborate on based on that and kind of how that process works.
Well, you've reminded me of, and I hate to keep coming back to elk, but it is sort of one of the most popular hunts we sell. Most of the hunts we sell are guided hunts, fully guided hunts, outfitted hunts. But we also sell a few that are DIY elk hunts, drop camp elk hunts, self-guided elk hunts. And as you might expect, those hunts are sort of half or less the price of a fully guided hunt. So as a result, they can be initially quite attractive to people because of the price. And we get a number of inquiries about those. And but again, it's not something that, unless you're talking to someone very familiar with it, you may not understand some of the finer points of this kind of hunt. And to be honest, I actually I discourage that kind of hunt for somebody, for anybody other than a very experienced elk hunter. Because here's the reality on a sort of a drop camp wilderness type elk hunt. They're going to pack you in by horseback to a remote tent camp in the middle of nowhere. They're going to drop you off. You've never been there in your life. It'll take you a day or two probably to figure out, what direction is up, maybe another day or two to figure out maybe where the elk are. Maybe there's a little bit of bad weather that, slows you down as well. And just when you sort of start getting rolling, guess what? The week is over. They're coming to get you and your trip is done. And the reality is the success rates on self-guided hunts of just about any description are never going to be close to what they are for a fully guided hunt. And, now some people will say to me, well, okay, that's probably true for the first year of such a hunt, but we would come back again the second year or the third year or the fourth year. And I say, okay, well, that's a different story. Now the learning curve isn't going to be as steep. Now you're going to have some familiarity with the area. Now, your odds are going to go up. But if it's about the money, which it is for a lot of people, well, now you've spent that same money 2 or 3 times over. So when it comes down to money, and that's sort of the motivating factor, I really try to encourage people to look at it differently and say, rather than sort of taking your lumps the way you most likely are the first year, and then who knows what happens after that, I think you're better off to save your money and maybe for another year or two even, and do it right. Do a guided trip, do an outfitted trip where your chances of success or even just seeing some elk are that much greater. To give you an example, I had a group contact me a little while ago. They were all sort of young guys, all pretty fit and eager, and they were from out east, and they'd been hunting whitetails all their life, but never even seen an elk in the flesh. And they decided that they thought they'd want to do a self-guided drop camp elk hunt. And their thinking was that they'd maybe do those for 2 or 3 years and then work their way up to a guided hunt at some point. And I actually suggested the opposite approach. I said, well, why don't you start with a guided hunt? Because you can learn a lot about elk and elk hunting from a good elk guide, whether it's calling or where the elk hang out or what to do with it once you've got it on the ground. All these things that you do 1 or 2 of those, And you're going to be so much better off when you decide to do it on your own and branch off on your. You'll have that much knowledge and experience under your belt. So certain DIY trips, we have a great DIY antelope hunt in Wyoming. We have a great DIY caribou hunt in Alaska. But outside of that, most of the trips we offer are fully guided, outfitted trips, and there's a reason for that. You pay for. I'll give you another example. First time I hunted Wyoming, I was on an antelope hunt. It was a guided antelope hunt. It was long before I became a booking agent. Literally the first antelope I ever laid eyeballs on. I had just gotten off the plane that afternoon. My hunt wasn't actually going to technically start till the next morning. My guide grabs me and off we go. Literally the first antelope that I saw in the flesh was a 16+ inch buck. But because it was the first one I ever saw, and I didn't want my hunt to end that quickly. This was my vacation back then. And my hunt hadn't even started yet. And it was potentially going to be over before it began. I didn't want to shoot this antelope. My guide had to twist my arm to shoot this antelope because he knew what we were looking at. I had no idea what we were looking at because what do I know? I'm a kid from Canada who just got off a plane 2 hours ago. And, I felt foolish later on because he did have to twist my arm to shoot that dandy antelope. And it took a couple of days of driving around and seeing lots of other antelope before I really appreciated and realized that they're not all this big. And then I felt foolish. But then I realized, but this is part of what you pay a guide and outfitter for, that local knowledge to be able to say, you know what, I think we can do better. Let's keep looking versus, you know what, that is a dandy. We got to go after him right now. Let's hurry up. And, time is money. You're paying an outfitter, you're paying a guide for a lot of time and work that's been put in long before you got there that you'll never see. And yet that all is part of the price of a fully guided hunt. So it comes down to value. So whether it's a bear hunt, an antelope hunt, an elk hunt, there is a big difference between guys. Now, if a guy say to me, look, we realize all that. We know that, odds are not really on our side when it's DIY, but, we just like to do it ourselves. We sink or swim. We know what it's like. We know we've done it before, but we just really want to succeed or fail on our own. Hey, I can respect that. I understand that. That's a whole different story. But when it's about money, when money is the motivating reason why somebody is looking DIY versus a guided hunt, that's when I usually try and sort of explain the realities of it and maybe steer them in a different direction.
Sure. No, that's a great explanation to probably a little bit more of a complicated question to a newer hunter. I mean, to someone who's been hunting a long time, that's probably a different philosophy. But to your point, getting off a plane, never hunted, antelope before, and you see the first buck and it's an 80-inch buck and he's telling you to shoot it, you don't know the difference. That's where the advantage is with having the outfitter, because that's what they do, right? They look over animals every day long. They know exactly what's there. Stuff comes in and out, but they're outfield judging and they're looking at the animals. And you're right. And for someone to go do a DIY, it could take them 10 to 15 days to do that hunt. Whereas if you book a 5 to 7 day hunt, you're in, you're out, you're done, you've had your experience, and you're back to work, which potentially, like you said, time is money and is important as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Don, this has been a great conversation. I guess one last question I would ask is,
sure.
So I get emails from Hunt Nation. I get emails from a lot of different of these types of organizations. I guess what do you feel sets Hunt Nation apart, maybe from some of your competitors or some of the other organizations out there that do things very similar?
Well, I'm certainly not going to suggest that we're the only game in town, or that there aren't other quality outfits out there, because there are. But I think a couple of things. One is this is what we all do for a living. This isn't just something we do on the side, because our day job is something else. This is what we do. We spend a lot of time becoming familiar with what we offer and our outfitters and our clients. and making sure that we're doing the best matchmaking we possibly can. So this is what we do. Second, it doesn't cost you anything, and that's not always the case. I know some other agencies, they do charge some fees for this or that, and we don't. It really, doesn't cost you any more to book through us versus booking directly. And third, we have a great selection of trips to offer. There's really nothing that I can think of as in terms of a major hole in our roster, in our portfolio of outfitters and trips offered by those outfitters. Like just about anything that somebody is looking for, we can, whereas some places might be really more focused on Asia or Africa or North America, whatever the case may be. We truly are global. Antarctica aside, we offer trips on every continent. So between sort of the experience we have, the one-stop shopping, the no cost to you, and sort of the expertise that we offer, because this is what we do and have been doing successfully for a long time with a good reputation. I think that's where our bread is buttered, so to speak. That's what we offer, and that's what we're proud of. We've been successful in sort of a tough industry for a long time by doing things a certain way, essentially telling it like it is, and we're going to continue to do things that way.
Yeah. Well, I think to your point, a bit of a family business, and also longevity, 20 years in the industry. You guys have been to a lot of these places. You've been to that Midwest, Ohio whitetail, 2,000 acre plot where, you shoot good deer. So it's probably easier for you to market this stuff being there. And like you said, somewhat being a smaller, but, been in business for 20 years. Not a lot of people have been, booking hunts for 20 years. I think, that definitely sets you guys apart from a lot of the other competition as well.
Yeah. There's been some have come and gone in that time span. So, you're probably doing something right if you can be around and not just survive, but flourish. We continue to grow and expand and be very, very busy.
Yeah, so for sure.
So we think we must be doing something right.
Yeah. Maybe just a little selfish plug on my part, but I do get a lot of questions coming through the platform regarding Canada, being that I've kind of got you captive here and that you're on here with us. So I had a stone sheep hunt scheduled for last year, like you and I had talked about, and obviously was postponed because I couldn't get into Canada. And so, again, looking at trying to rebook, like you were talking about, you had guys with hunts on the books on 20, got rolled over to 21. Some guys that had them on 21, potentially having to roll them over into 22, and ones in 20, they may have to roll into 22. So what is the outlook being there in Canada? What are you guys hearing? What are you guys seeing about potential for foreign nationals like us to be able to travel into Canada potentially this fall to do hunts?
Well, that is a $64,000 question, and people when they find out I'm Canadian figure I must have some
you got the answer right,
this, but I really don't. Nobody does. I can tell you. This is what I can tell you. I mean, officially, as we sit here today, the border is still closed until 21st of February, but that doesn't really mean anything because they just keep extending that date by another 30 days. I mean, it's been rolled, I don't know how many times now already. The reality is that parts of Canada are definitely struggling right now, including where I am in Ontario, with COVID. Numbers are very high in some places and not really improving. The rollout of the vaccine is so far very, very slow, quite a bit slower than the United States. So those things are certainly not encouraging. Any jurisdiction, I think, whether it's Argentina, South Africa, Canada, any jurisdiction that's sort of presently closed or heavily restricted to travelers is not only going to look at their domestic situation vis-a-vis COVID, but they're also going to look at where the situation in the countries where travelers are going to be coming from when deciding, what to do or not to do in this regard. You'd hope that that eventually as numbers start to improve and as the vaccine is more widely distributed, that these restrictions start to be relaxed, maybe replaced by proof of negative COVID test or proof of vaccination. These are the requirements now for coming into a country, and that's already sort of in place in a number of different places. But so far, not in Canada. As I sort of alluded to before, I think most outfitters are not optimistic about spring at all. They're maybe 50-50 on the summer, June, July, August for fishing or hunting, and more just sort of banking on the fall, sort of September onward, hoping that moose and deer and bear can happen September, October, November, but without knowing for sure. And then when you talk about some of these more remote areas, whether it's a sheep hunt in northern British Columbia or maybe a moose hunt in the Yukon, for instance, these areas are often native communities, very remote, very isolated, very vulnerable to any sort of an outbreak. So these communities, in some cases, Alaska did the same thing this summer, will impose their own sort of regional restrictions on entry into that area. So regardless of a state or provincial or federal regulation, they can say, well, look, that's fine for getting into the country, but if you want to fly into our little community, we've got our own rules in terms of what you have to do or can't do. So it's still very, very uncertain. And, a lot of outfitters are, sort of just completely, about all they can do is just take a wait and see approach. And it's funny because some Canadians say to me, Canadian clients, well, what about me? Well, maybe I can do that sheep hunt in BC or that, moose hunt in Alberta. If again, the border is closed to Americans, well, maybe there's great opportunity there for other Canadians. The reality is the outfitters are going, well, maybe, but maybe not, because we've got all these spots that are already spoken for from people who had already booked 21 or got rolled from 2020. We can't really commit to any new bookings, Canadian or otherwise, until we know whether we're going to be able to satisfy what's already on our books for, last year and this year. So it is causing a whole lot of consternation and hair pulling amongst outfitters, and unfortunately, there's just nothing terribly encouraging on the horizon just yet to say, well, that's when things are going to change. That's when it's going to improve. It just seems to be so slow in every regard that. Let's put it this way. I don't know, as much as you'd like to say, well, yeah, surely by August or September or whatever. Well, yeah, I tend to agree with you. On the other hand, this time last year, would we have thought we'd be here in January of 21 and sort of be where we are? Or maybe not this time last year, but in March of last year, would we have thought come January, we're still going to be where we are? Probably not. Probably a lot of us would have said, no, this will have subsided by then. And yet here we are. So it is still very, very much uncertain. I definitely would not sort of want to give anybody the impression that a trip booked for 2021 in Canada is a certainty, because that would be irresponsible of me to say that when no one can say that with any certainty. Nobody.
Yeah. And I think that's good insight, right? Because I know there's a handful of people I know that had, Canadian hunts booked, the Yukon, like you said, Alberta, British Columbia, and all kind of in the same boat, right? There's kind of this just band of folks that were kind of bouncing emails, text messages off, talking to outfitters that we know. What are you guys hearing? What are you guys seeing? And just trying to stay obviously optimistic. But, like to your point, I was supposed to fly into Whitehorse and then come back down into northern BC. Well, like you say, a lot of natives there, they have their own requirements. Would I have had to quarantine in Whitehorse for 14 days, then get into BC? There were so many logistical things that were so much uncertainty that, we had to pull the plug and we couldn't get there. And it was the right decision to make, because the last thing I would want to be is stuck in Canada, right, where I couldn't get back into the States, and if it wasn't for family or medical reasons, I wouldn't be able to get back, right? So just didn't take that risk, but definitely, I'm trying to stay optimistic. I think, a lot of folks that are in the same boat are trying to stay optimistic. Clearly, the Canadian outfitters want to be optimistic. This is their livelihood, right? This is their Super Bowl for the 4 months out of the year, is getting, people there to do these hunts. So hopefully, like you say, with maybe the vaccine and maybe having some type of testing protocol, rapid testing, 72-hour, we can get through this and do it, both ethically but also safely, where we're doing it in at least with the respect of the people in mind. So.
Yeah, and I particularly feel bad for the outfitters in places like Canada, like Argentina, because their season is so short. They've got a very small window to, in a lot of cases, make the bulk of their living for an entire year within a very short span of time. When you contrast that with places like, some countries in Africa, South Africa in particular, we have an outfitter, a great one we work with in South Africa, that they're blessed to be able to hunt basically year round. Now, they too have had basically nobody for the better part of a year, but the point is, if they do get sort of torpedoed for a block of their year, they still have an opportunity to try and recover that later on. Whereas Canada and Argentina, other places, if it's gone this year, there's no chance till next year. So it is really very disappointing to everybody if that happens. And by the way, you mentioned British Columbia. British Columbia has also been one of the most strict, probably the strictest province in Canada when it came to their own particular rules provincially. So I mentioned, you've got sort of the communities that may have their own restrictions, and of course federally with the national border being closed. But then you also have to layer in another, provincially. They're flying in and out of a particular province could be problematic. So, and of course, the airlines are a whole other story, because they have had no choice but to slash routes to all these various destinations, because the demand has just the bottom has fallen out from the demand. So they're eliminating these flights, and you would hope and believe that once the restrictions are at least eased, the demand will suddenly resume, and then those flights will again be offered. But again, no guarantee of that. I've certainly heard stories about people just within the domestic lower 48 United States wanting to book a trip maybe to Texas or Florida, and initially being quite surprised at the number of available flights. And then they pick one, the cheapest one or best time or whatever. But then as the flight date gets closer, suddenly there's changes. The flight is canceled or rerouted or changed some way. And that's all because the airlines are trying to sort of accommodate a sharp decrease in demand for these flights. And rather than planes taking off with 25% capacity, they'll cancel that flight and try and put people onto a different flight. So it's not just outfitters, it's airlines as well that are in complete turmoil right now. So as we said before, that's just driven more and more demand for destinations for hunting and fishing trips that people can get to lower 48 and drive to. I don't have to fly. I don't have to deal with the potential and the risk. I'll just drive. Okay, that's the kind of trip I want. So we sure hope that there's a light at the end of the tunnel here, but it does seem to be a little ways off just yet.
Yeah. Well, I think I've always kind of said where there's challenges like that, exposes opportunities. And to your point, right? I mean, if you can't go do certain hunts there's some incredible opportunities in the lower 48. There's still places in Asia, in ibex hunting in Turkey, and places you can go do that stuff. You can get flights. Yeah. I mean, there are opportunities still out there, and some of them are pretty reasonable because, outfitters are looking to get people booked. So, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure.
Well, good. Don, I really appreciate having you on the show today. Just, for me, understanding a little bit better about Hunt Nation and what you guys offer. Again, I've been signed up and seen your emails for years, and again, kind of perked my interest when I sent the note over to look at that spring bear hunt with my brother, and got just a full portfolio of information, and then kind of spawned into us collaborating and doing a podcast. So really appreciate having you on. If someone was to want to book a hunt, look at your information, I mean, what's the best way for someone to maybe get a hold of you guys or find you guys?
So we have a website, www.hunt-nation.com. A lot of good information on there. Many of the trips we offer are, at least some of the information about them is accessible on there. We, as the individual agents, have more information that we can then send people. I definitely encourage everybody to sign up for our newsletter so they can get that weekly email blast that, as I mentioned before, sort of showcases a nice selection of different trips around the world. But it also will front and center feature anything that's last minute cancellation or some other type of discount. So that's the kind of thing that, typically it's very limited supply and will go very quickly. So it's important anyone who's interested potentially in that kind of trip, who has the flexibility in their schedule to take trips on short notice, definitely you would want to sign up for that and look at those emails as soon as they come in. And if you see something that you like, call us right away or email us right away, because the good ones with good discounts will go quickly, as you might imagine. I can certainly be reached personally. My email is don@hunt-nation.com, or you can give me a call at 416-988-1562. We're happy to help you out with, as I said, any of the very thousands of different hunting or fishing trips that we offer. So we're out there. We're pretty easy to reach.
Cool. Well, once again, thanks, Don. Appreciate it. You stay well and probably stay a little bit warm up there in Canada. And we're going to try to stay dry. It's always the first world problems, right? If it's not freezing cold, it's raining or something else. But
keep your powder dry. Keep your powder dry.
Exactly. Well, again, thanks. Take care. I appreciate having you on. And we'll stay in touch. Thanks.
Thanks for having me on, Lucas. Really enjoyed it.